Okay, Boker Tov. Today's daf is Hay, and we pick up in the middle of a fascinating discussion about Nazir Shimshon and Nazir Olam, and we pick up at the bottom of Dalet Amud Bet, and we are the Shimshon Love Nazir Have, one which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 lines from the bottom. So the Gemara says, right, the whole question here was whether Shimshon accepted the Nazirus himself or not, and whether it was a classic like Nazirus of that came through a vow, that came through a neder, so therefore it's possible to extend it to yourself. Do you have the mechanism of creating Nazir Shimshon, a debate of the Tanaim? So the Gemara now says, the Shimshon love Nazir Have, and was Shimshon not a Nazir? Now that's the Haks. Now, of course, that's a funny question. Nobody said he wasn't a Nazir. The question was whether he had done it through a vow or not, and the problems that created. But the Gemara assumes. Well, let's see the question. Vaksiv, doesn't the verse say Nazir Elokim that the child will be a Nazir to God from the womb? So you see, he wasn't a Nazir. It says, no, Hasam Malachu Dekamar. No, that was just the angel that was saying. Now, to fit this into the previous discussion, we'd have to say that the question was, didn't he accept the Nazirus, through a neder? Because that was the problem we had yesterday, that it wasn't through a neder. And it says, oh, but doesn't the angel say? And then it says, yeah, it was just the angel, which doesn't really explain the exchange. How does the fact that the angel said that he will be a Nazir, how is that supposed to demonstrate that he accepted his Nazirus through a vow? Right? Everybody remember that yesterday, that the issue was that it didn't come about through a vow. So how is that supposed to demonstrate that? So, Tosfos tries to read that in. Didn't the angel say he was supposed to be a Nazir, and didn't he accept the Nazirus in the normal way? Because that's what he would have done. And the answer was no, it was just what the angel said. But more simply, I think this Gemara might be reading the debate of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, like I think the impression one initially gets. If you go back and you remember that what Rabbi Shimon says is, just like 5 lines from the top to remind you, it says, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Ha'omer Nazir Shimshon lo amar klum, shelo metzinu b'Shimshon sheyatzta Nazirus mipi. But he never said that he would be a Nazir. Now, that could be read in one of 2 ways. He was a Nazir, but it was not through a vow, and therefore you can't transfer it. That's the way the Gemara read it yesterday. Or you could read it that Rabbi Shimon is saying he never was a Nazir. Okay? So the Gemara says, what do you mean he never was a Nazir? The angel says he was a Nazir. And then the answer is, no, that was the angel sort of, directing, but it doesn't mean that he actually ultimately had that certainly like as a halachic status. All right. Anyway, that is wrapping up the point of yesterday, that Shimshon, according to Rabbi Shimon, either was a Nazir, but it didn't come through a vow, and therefore it cannot be transferred, or maybe the Gemara is hinting at an idea that maybe according to Rabbi Shimon, he wasn't a Nazir at all, at least not a halachic Nazir. All right, now the Gemara continues. We know on the Mason. Now, how do you know that if there is this thing called Nazir Shimshon, and you are able to sort of make yourself into a Nazir Shimshon through, let's say, transferring Shimshon status onto you, if that's the mechanism as we learned yesterday? How do you know that that has an allowance for becoming Tamei? Where do you know that Shimshon ever became Tamei Mace? He certainly killed a lot of people, but how do you know he directly touched them? So the Gemara says, if you say it's from the verse, with the jawbone of an ass, I slew 1,000 men. So if you're hitting them with that, you're coming in contact with them, and then it gets interesting questions about tuma b'chiburin. If you didn't touch them directly with your body, but you touch them through through something else. But if you're getting that close to slay them with the jawbone of an ass, so then presumably you came in contact with them. So the Gemara says, Dilma girui garibu. Maybe he threw it at them. He took this, maybe it was a boomerang or something, because he had to retrieve it. Anyway, maybe he slew it at them, below Nagabu, and he never actually touched them. All right, so you can't prove that he touched them. Elamihacha from here. And he smote from them 30 men, and he removed their tunics, their garments. So if you're going to go ahead and remove their garments after they're dead, you're going to come in contact with them. So the Gemara says, maybe he first got them to undress and then he killed them. So he didn't have to come in contact with them after he killed them. So the Gemara says, no, it says he smote and he took it after he smote them. Also, how are you going to get them to cooperate in the other way? Anyway, the Dilma goes sing Shavinan. Well, maybe what he did was he gave them all fatal wounds, and as they were dying but not yet dead, he removed their garments from them. So you can't prove he actually touched them when they were dead. Ella, fine. Gemara Gemira. It's a tradition we have that Shimshon actually came in contact with some of the people that he killed. All right, so that's the end of Nazir Shimshon. Then the Gemara says like this: the Nazir Olam Hechaksiv. Where is it mentioned the idea of a Nazir Olam, that we have this concept that somebody that it's again not just somebody is choosing not to terminate their Nazirut, but the nature of the Nazirut is that it's a permanent state, and that actually gives an allowance to cut the hair periodically. So the Gemara says, Ditan Brisa, Rabbi Omer, Avshalom Nazir Olam Haya. The same way we learned out this idea called Nazir Shimshon from a story in Tanakh, we learned out this idea of Nazir Olam from a story in Tanakh. Avshalom was a Nazir Olam, right? Because the whole story about him getting caught up in the tresses of his hair by the tree and so on. Shene'emar Vayiketz 40 Shanan was after 40 years, and this was when Avshalom was basically plotting the the rebellion against his father, against King David. So Shana Vayom Avshalom ala Melech, and he said to the king, Elchana, let me go. Vashalim et nidaraya asher nadarti laHashem. I will satisfy my vow that I made to God. Bechevron. In Chevron, and we know that he would cut his hair once every 12 months, according to Rabbi, that says it's once every 12 months. And it was from days to days at the end of that, and that's understood. So the assumption here that's being read into the Psukim, it's not literally in the Psukim, is fulfill my vow. Is since we're going to say that a Nazir Olam cuts their hair, when they choose to cut their hair, they do it by bringing the 3 korbanot that normally terminate Nazirut. So sort of the deal is with them. You don't get to terminate your Nazirut, but you bring these korbans, and they sort of open up, create an opening for you, an allowance for you to cut your hair. So when Avshalom is saying, I got to go satisfy my vows, that means I got to go bring the korbanot that are going to allow me to cut my hair. All of this is being read into the psukim, okay? But that's how we're choosing to read these psukim. And it was done at the end of Yamim Liyamim, days to days, which we're going to say means at an annual year basis. He would do this. He would bring these nidarim, these vows, these korbanot, and therefore be allowed to cut his hair. Okay, the Yolif, top of Hamid Aleph, Yamim mi bate arechoma. And Rabbi learns a connection of the word Yamim here to where it says Yamim by houses in a walled city. Mahasam, the same way there it says, Yud Beis Chodesh, but we say there it says, right, that if a person sells a house in a walled city, he's got a year to buy it back. And if he doesn't buy it back, then he loses it permanently. He doesn't even get it back in the Yovel. And there the Torah says explicitly that it says that the Torah says Ad Melos Lo Shana Tmima, until 1 full year has completed. Okay, so it uses the word Yamim there, and it uses the word, what's the whole pasuk? The whole pasuk is, let me see. Where's the pasuk? Yamim tiyeh geulato. His geula will be for Yamim, and then it speaks of, and if he doesn't redeem it, Ad Lo Shana Tmima, and if he doesn't redeem it at the end of a full year. So you see, it's identifying. You can redeem it for the duration of Yamim, and you have until the end of a full year. So the word Yamim means a full year. Got that? It says Yamim. Okay. So Yamim Mibate Arechoma. Mahasam Yud Beis Chodesh. The same way there, you have a Yamim to redeem it, means 12 months, a full year. Avkan Yud Beis Chodesh. Here it also means it. So Avshalom is our model. He would do it periodically, Yamim Liyamim. We're reading in. He would bring these korbanot. He would cut his hair. We know he had this very long hair. He was a Nazir. That's what we're assuming, and so on. And therefore, that's how we get this idea. It was pointed out to me yesterday that it's interesting, again, because we ended yesterday with the story about the guy who became a Nazir in order to cut his hair. And we talked about the contrast to that, to the Mishnah, that the person grabs his hair the way Shmuel reads it and says, I will be beautiful, and that means I'll be a Nazir. So is the long hair, is it supposed to be beautiful, Nazir, growing the hair long, right? Or is it supposed to be a bad thing because you have to cut your hair in the end? And again, it's quite ironic because I would say Pshat of the Psukim is the reason you as I sense like the hair grows wild, and that makes you seem like like unkempt and not fit within normal society. So it's somebody pointed out to me yesterday, that the Avshalom example also is one in which the hair is described in Tanakh as something very beautiful. So it's an interesting question about whether the Nazir and the hair is seen as something very beautiful or something that actually makes them something of an outcast. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. So that's Rabbi who says a year. Well, actually, what I'm going to do is Dove asked me to apologize because he somehow lost the list. I'm glad to see I'm not the only one who loses things. That we did yesterday, so I'm going to pass this around again. Unfortunately, we don't have everybody here, but let's at least try to start reconstructing the list. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. So that's how Rabbi gets a year. Rabbi Nurai Omer, Rabbi Nurai. Now we're going to see a debate about how frequently a Nazir can cut his hair. Rabbi Nurai Omer, Megalech Achas L'Lamed Yom. Every 30 days, which is, it's a pretty big allowance. Here, a guy's a Nazir for life, and every 30 days he's allowed to get a trim. Okay, he doesn't get to cut his hair all off, but he's allowed to get a trim. But, he's basically patterning it after that's the standard duration of Naziris. So even though your Naziris goes for forever, after you've done a standard, like, a unit of Nazirut, you get an allowance to cut your hair. Okay, so that's what he says. Rabbi Yossi is even more radical. You get to cut every Erev Shabbos. Because princes, Avshalom here was a prince, so obviously he must have cut his hair frequently enough that he would seem like presentable as a prince. So clearly, learning from the model of Avshalom, we have to assume that he would cut his hair every week. Of course, this is completely strange. Number one is, if he trimmed his hair every week, how is the Torah describing, the Nevi'im described that he has such long hair and it got caught in the trees and all that whole thing, number one. And number two, so are we saying that since that must have been the case by Avshalom, then any normal person who accepts Nazirus Olam gets to do it on a weekly basis, right? It's also a little bit strange. Okay, maybe we have to be consistent, but it's pretty strange, I think, to sort of just assume that was true by Avshalom, even when the Pesukim indicate otherwise.
No, the first kash is not that. It's not that big a kai. He trimmed the ends, the split ends that he trimmed. That's all. It's a little
okay, trim. If you say that, so you're saying that if he's doing it every week, he's not doing it. He's not doing a serious haircut. He's only doing a little trim,
like you said.
Okay, maybe. The other interesting thing I would ask is, 1 minute. If I say I'm a Nazir and I have to wait 30 days, right? So then I have to be Gadel Para. The hair has to grow for 30 days. Less than that, it's not considered Gadel Para, right? So we're going to see that in a minute. That's one of the bases we know that it's 30 days. It's not significant hair growth until then. But if I say I'm a Nazir Olam, I get to take a haircut at the end of the week, right? It's like, when do I ever get to the Gadel Para, according to this, right? Maybe you say, I could say after the first month, after you got it to the normal stage that is considered now wild and unruly, now you can get it trimmed on a weekly basis. But it doesn't sound like what he's saying. So it's pretty ironic. All right, let's keep on going. So the Gemara says like this. Okay, my time at the Rabbi. What's the reasoning of Rabbi? We just said the reason, because he learned it out from Batei Arechoma. Yalif mi Batei Arechoma. He learned it out from the houses of a walled city. One Rabbi himself says that there's another halacha by Batei Arechoma. It says Yamin Tiye Gulato. Rabbi reads the word Yamin literally, days. And what Rabbi reads is the following. If I sell you a house in a walled city, right, the halacha is that I have a year to buy it back. Does that mean I can turn around 5 minutes later and buy it back? So Rabbi says no. The sale has to last minimum 2 days. Okay, so basically, so that's how he reads it. Yamin Tia goes after you've waited 2 days, then you have the rest of the year to buy it back. Yeah, exactly. So Rabbi reads Yamin, not meaning a year, meaning literally 2 days. How can he use that as the basis to this pasuk by Avshalom to say it means a year? So the Gemara says like this. Ein Yamin Pchusi Mishayim. So the Gemara says, Hai Gzeira Shava Mishum Kovet Gamir. Ubishnei Yamin Leka Kovet. Okay, 1 minute. No. He can't read it literally 2 days, because the whole idea is to say that the hair got too heavy, and that explains the context of the allowance. Hair does not get too heavy after 2 days, so that cannot be the way he learns it. Okay, but as long as Yamin means plural, they ma beis shanim. How about, let's say it means 2 years. Here's another pasuk that has the word Yamim and has it in the context of 2 years. And it was at the end of 2 years of days. So link, here it says Yamim, there it says Yamim, here it means 2 years. Let's say it's a 2 year wait. Now, the verse by Avshalom says Yamim liyamim. It doesn't mention years. And the verse by Batei Arechoma says Yamim tia gulato. And it only mentions a year in the later pasuk, Ad Melot Lo Shana Tmima. But the actual phrase of Yamim comes without the word year. So that's a closer link to the pasuk by Avshalom. Rather than linking it to this verse, where it says Shnatayim Yamim, where the word Yamim is qualified, through a juxtaposed word of Shnatayim. So yes, in this context, if you're saying Shnatayim Yamim, it means 2 years. But we want to know what the word Yamim means without any qualifier. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, right? If you have a qualifier, that's one thing. We have the word yamim appearing by Avshalom without a qualifier. We'd like to learn it from another pasuk that has yamim without a qualifier, which is Batei Arechoma. And since there, it cannot mean 2 days because that would be absurd by the case of the Nazir. We have to say that the yamim there also has the meaning of the next pasuk, which is you have until the end of a year. Yes.
It's so interesting because the medieval Pashtanim all say that yamim means a year. Pshat,
really?
The term yamim in the Tanakh is 1 year.
Interesting. There you go. Okay, so the Gemara says, so you can't bring any evidence from a verse that has a word 2 years juxtaposed to yamim. That changes the meaning of it. So the Gemara says, how about 30 days? Ad chodesh yamim, until a month of days. So you see there, yamim is used with chodesh. The answer is going to be obvious. There also, it's a juxtaposed word that changes what the meaning of the word yamim means. No, the verse by Avshalom says yamim without a qualifier, without the word chadashim. The verse by Batei Arechoma says yamim without a qualifier, without the word months. You can't bring evidence from a verse that has the word yamim qualified by the word months. So therefore, with a qualifier, it means something else. But we want to learn what the word yamim means without a qualifier. Okay, and now the Gemara says like this: Ve'ema mehacha miyamim yamima. Let's learn it from this verse by the women who would visit the daughter of Yiftach. Right, she was there. It's interesting. One wonders, is there some, obviously, I mean, the Gemara is just quoting psukim from all over, but thinking about nidarim and the power of nidarim, and and by Shimshon, the parents, sort of, he became a Nazir not through anything he accepted upon himself, and Yiftach's daughter, whatever happened to her because of nothing she did, but because of a vow that Yiftach made. Anyway, interesting in the context of nidarim, but she's there in her like little hut or wherever she is, and before she gets offered to God, the women come and they visit her on a periodic basis. Okay, and it says in the psukim that they would come basically 4 times a year. So if they would come 4 times a year, and it says miyamim, and so you divide it, it's an average of 3 months every time. So maybe the word yamim means every 3 months. So the Gemara says, dani yamim yamim ve'ein dani yamim yamima. You learn that the word yamim from a simple yamim, and not from this puzzle, which says yamim yamima, which is a slightly different form of the word. So it's not as close of a match. So the Gemara says, who cares when you're making Gzeira Shava if the words are exactly the same? The Tana debate Rabbi Shmuel. The Gemara always loves quoting this. We have the teaching of Rabbi Shmuel by the pasuk about sarat, about if there's leprosy in the house, sarat in the house. That one pasuk says Vishav HaKohen, the Kohen returns to the house, and another pasuk says Ubah HaKohen, the Kohen comes to the house. And what we do is we make a Gzeira Shava. And we say, Zohi Shiva, Zohi Bia. Returning to the house, coming to the house, it's the same point. You came to the house. So therefore, we learn what it says from one of those sections to the other because we say the words connect. They're essentially the same point. So that, the Gemara says, could be evidence that we, by Gzeira Shava, it doesn't have to be the exact same word. As long as the sense is the same, the actual word itself doesn't have to be identical. Okay, so this is always what the Gemara throws this in to raise the question of whether Gzeira Shava has to be a precise matching of words. Rabbi, and the answer is always the same. The answer is, that's if we have no other choice. If you have no closer match, Gzeira Shava will tolerate a link of meaning, even if it's not a link of the exact same words. But that's if no closer match is available. But if there's a closer match, and Gzeira Shava only forces you to do the best closest match to that word in terms of the word itself, not just its meaning. So therefore, we're not going to learn from Yiftach, where it says Yamim Yamima, which is 4 times a year. We're going to learn from Batei Arechoma, which says Yamim, which is once a year. And Iga Da'amri, and one last explanation why we're not going to learn from Yiftach is Mino Yadina Dekot Tlasa Yarchin Chad Zimna, who tells you just because they visited 4 times a year, it meant they did it at a perfect spacing, 3 months at a time. Dilma, Arba zimnei b'shata, 4 times a year, but they were a little irregular in terms of how frequently they would visit within that space. Arba yarchin chad zimna, first maybe they'd first have a gap of 4 months, train yarchin b'chad zimna, then a gap of 2 months, and so on and so forth. So just because it was 4 times a year, you can't prove that it was every 3 months. And since therefore we don't know how frequently that is, so you can't learn from Yiftach any sense of any periodic standard length, that's why you don't learn from Yiftach. So bottom line is, Avshalom is being understood to be a Nazir. He would go and he would satisfy his vows. That shows us and understood to mean that he would bring his korbanot that would let him trim his hair, and he would do this periodically, miyamin, which we understand to mean on a yearly basis, and that's where Rabbi gets the idea that a Nazir Olam can trim his hair on a yearly basis if he brings the korbanot. Yes.
What do you think about this? The structure of the sugya is forcing me to learn the bright of Rabbi Yishmael, who was very concerned with traditions of hermeneutics, to read that bright as if he's talking about a Gezei Rashava in context. But that bright is not talking about a Gezei Rashava. Well, it's not a Gezei Rashava to say that these 2 different words are synonyms.
Okay, so you are right that, there's 2 things. Number one is Rabbi Yishmael himself is Dibur Torah Koloshim B'nei Adam, so he more goes anyway in terms of meaning than in terms of the precise, morphology or the precise, letter, letter perfect aspect of the word. Number 2 is he necessarily using the Gezei Rashava modality?
Exactly.
That's a bigger question also, what did Gezei Rashava originally mean? There's actually an early Mishnah about Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, it might even be Shammai and Hillel, that they say when they're comparing 2 rabbinic laws, I forget what it was, I think one was Eruv, I think it might have been an Eruv Tchumen case. Anyway, it was 2 rabbinic laws, and they say Gezei Rashava. Look, you can make a comparison between the 2. So Gezei Rashava, in its earliest form, might not have meant this sort of technical magic of you link 2 words and you get to transfer the ideas. It might have initially meant that these 2 concepts are analogous and comparable, and therefore you can, it might have been more of a logical point than of a formal thing that allows you to just automatically transfer all the the laws from one to the other. Anyway. But yes, so thank you. That's a good point. So now let's go on. So the Gemara says like this. So that's Rebbe. Rebbe Nehorai says, Megalech achat l'shloshim yom, once every 30 days. Okay, where do you get that from? My time. Where do you get? What's the reason? What's behind that? Gabi Kohanim, because of the Kohanim. Mishum de'ika kovet. Kohanim cannot let their hair be gadel pera, grow wild, and that's because after 30 days it's considered to be growing wild. Hachanami kakovet. Here too, it's considered to be too weighty. Now, of course, Tosfos points out this is ironic because the only way we know Kohanim, when it says it has to be that they can't allow their hair to be gadel pera, it means more than 30 days, is from. Any guesses? Where do you think we would learn that the definition of hair growing wild for a Kohen is more than 30 days? From a Nazir. A standard Naziris is 30 days. We're going to see about that in the next Mishnah. And the Naziris, when his hair is described as it has to be gadel pera, it has to be wild, unruly. So we see from a Nazir that 30 days growth defines the hair to be that way. A Kohen is not allowed to let his hair be gadel pera. So that means 30 days. So that's how we get to a Kohen. So now we're saying, how do you know that a Nazir Olam gets to trim his hair after 30 days? Oh, because for Kohanim, that's considered to be wild growth. That's a little funny, like you went this way, right? Why did you just say, from a normal Nazir, you see that it's wild growth? So Tosfos says, well, maybe we'd rather not learn Nazir Olam from Nazir Shah. Maybe Kohanim is a more neutral basis, but it's very funny because it's all coming from the idea that we have by a Nazir that more than 30 days is a wild growth. Okay, again, it's pretty funny because if you think about it, it's like, what are we saying? I get that after 30 days. Here's basically my question. When a Nazir Olam gets his trim, does the hair can it get back to the pre-30 day length, right? Can a Nazir Olam's hair be not gadel pera? Here I am. I'm going through my life as a Nazir, but my hair always looks perfect because every 31 days, for maybe there's one day where it gets unruly, day 31, and then I get a nice little trim and it looks totally acceptable. So for another 30 days, it looks totally fine, right? So it's interesting that I would think that as a Nazir Olam, I'm allowed to get it trimmed, but it still has to remain at the status of pera. It still has to remain, larger than it would be after 30 days. If I'm getting it trimmed every 30 days, then it's sort of always getting to be under the pera state. So it's very strange. Yes. So yeah.
Is it possible that pera, as we've been as we saw in the last story, could actually just mean beautiful, that a Kohen shouldn't have his hair be too long and beautiful. And then in context with the third time that Paris used to write in the sequence of the Sota, that the idea of having a woman head covering because of para of beauty.
I don't think, no. I mean, first of all, logically, that would make sense. Why? I mean, you're taking the point I made that is by the Nazir here sometimes seen as beautiful in these psukim, but it's very clear from the context. Like it says after Chet Ha'ego, ki farao aharon, ki paruahu, ki farao aharon, and upara rosh ha'isha. Why would we be trying to make the sota, who the whole ritual there is about, sort of about degrading? Why would be? So it doesn't fit in the context.
I was thinking, in other words, if he's a Nazir Olam,
yes,
and he gets a little trim every 30 days,
right.
The para aspect is a lifelong. No, it's always cutting it a little bit.
So that's my question. That's what I'm asking.
So
how much is he cutting it?
Of his life.
Here's my question, right? Here's the Nazir Olam, right? This is his hair after 30 days. You like that?
Yeah.
Okay. That's his hair. No, that's his hair at 29 days. That's not yet para. Now his hair is like this. Now he's 30 days, it's para, and now he's able to get a trim. Can he get this? No, he's only allowed to do that. But even if he does that, he's back down to the 29-day status.
No, 29 days later.
So he's only allowed to get, after 30 days, he's only allowed to get the thing that's after 30 days. He has to remain. That's what I'm asking. Does he have to keep the para status of his hair? Okay, the Gemara is not clear about that.
Also, the embedding of the Kohen here is because the Nazir and Kohen are constantly right.
Right, that is true, but it's still funny that we're importing something that we originally got from Nazir. All right, let's continue. So it says, okay, every Friday. Ma'ika, so the Gemara says, so it's very nice. First of all, again, that really raises the question. Here's the guy's a Nazir Olam. His hair always looks perfect. He gets a weekly haircut. That's totally, I mean, I can't begin to understand that. How you can be a Nazir Olam and have your hair always get a weekly haircut. Anyways, the Gemara says,
unless he already has his para. He has his para.
So that's what I was at. Right. So unless that's it. You first have to grow the para, and then every week, you get to trim it again to like the pre-para status, or to just lessen.
I would just like to interject on a personal note. Let's say theoretically I became a Nazir. I think I would be para challenged. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you very much.
Right, it's leveling the playing field a little bit for the
All right, thank you. Okay, so it says like this. No, Nazir Olam is permanent Naziris.
Right, but I'm saying that maybe since you're becoming a Nazir forever, that there's like one area that you can be sort of like lax.
Yeah, but the laxity would seem to be to allow you to violate, as it were, or the prohibition of cutting the hair. One would still think that the state of being paras should be maintained. Right? I understand that's what would emerge, is that we're actually making it actually not just that the act of cutting is permissible, that the actual state of being a Nazir looks different, looks more acceptable for him, which is strange. It's very strange. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. Ma'ika beinei. So we know that he learned it out because he assumes that Avshalom must have done it on a weekly basis. So the Gemara says, Ma'ika beinei l'shar achuhi. So then how is Avshalom different than any other of his brothers, the other princes? They're also getting a haircut on a weekly basis. So, so it doesn't say that his hair is in para. That's my question. It's just saying his hair is completely like everybody else's. So the Gemara says, what's the difference? Yantiv shechali up emsa Shabbos. Oh, the difference would be if he had a yantiv in the middle of the week. His brothers, of course, would get a haircut because of covered yantiv, simchas yantiv. He wouldn't be able to get a haircut in the middle of the week. So that would be a time where he would look a little different than his brothers. Inami or legeluche mean safra tamali shabsa. How about getting it, Friday morning? Achui of Erev Shabbos, Achui Megalchin, they could get their haircut already Friday morning. Since he has this idea of the prohibition of a Nazir, he'd have to wait until the last minute. Lo Megalech Panya until the evening, until like right before sunset. And Tosfos, by the way, also points out maybe this also includes the idea that he couldn't get a haircut unless he brought his korbanot. Okay, and he says maybe that's what it means until the evening. You first had to bring your korbanot. But what it's really asking is not the korbanot question. It's like, how does he look different in his hair than his brothers? All right. So very interesting range of opinions here. Now the Gemara has just a question. What do you mean he did it after 40 years? And the implicit that he did his rebellion. And the implicit question is that David was only king for 37 years. So it can't mean 40 years from the beginning of David's kingship. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Nurai Omer Mishum Rabbi Yeshua Lekates Mem Shana Sheshalu Lehen Melech. It's 40 years counting back to the time when Bnei Yisrael asked from a king from Shmuel. And the analogy that one of the Mefarshim say is they sort of rebelled against the divine kingship by wanting an earthly king, which clearly is what Shmuel talks about when he is very offended by their request. And so here now, 40 years later, Avshalom is rebelling against his father's kingship. Okay, Tana, we taught also Shana Shishalul and Melech Hishnas Eser Lishmuel Haramasi. The year that they asked for a king was the 10th year of the career of Shmuel, and that is long explanations about how that's they have to say that in order to explain how all the math works out in terms of all the chronology and all the dates. Yes.
Did you say anything about Rav? Is there anything for you to say about Rav Nehorai? Is he a very late? Was he Ga'an?
No, he's Tanaitic. It's I don't know the exact dates, but he's standard Tana. Okay, I know it's a funny name. All right, let's take a look. Next Mishnah. Stam Nazir Shloshim Yom. Standard Naziris is 30 days. Very simple Mishnah. Question where we get this from, but it means if somebody does not, Stam is also the difference of Mefaresh, meaning you're not explicating. You just say I'm a Nazir. You don't say how long. Unexplicated Naziros is 30 days. Standard unexplicated 30 days. Okay, so after 30 days, you get to bring your korbanot. Now we're back to the world of normal Nazir, not just Shimsha, Nazir, Shimsha, Nazir, Ola. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. How do I know that a Nazir is assumed to be 30 days? So Amar of Masna Markra, the verse says, Kadosh Yeh, holy will be the growing of his hair, Gadel Peras Arosho. Yiyah b'gematria plus an avu. So do the math, right? Yiyah in gematria, yud and a yud and two hays is 30. All right. So that's what I played. It's always interesting when gematria plays a role in halacha. But Pada Amar, obviously, what it seems clear sometimes also when you just have like 5 different ways of learning out the same halacha, it seems very clear that they basically had a tradition, and we have this tradition. Now we have to figure out how we're going to connect it back to the psukim. Okay, which is, by the way, an interesting whole debate in the Rishonim and in the academics in general about all the drashot of Chazal. Do we assume that Chazal really derived the laws from their drashot? They really didn't know, and they said, let's look at the psukim and figure out what the laws are? Or did they start with traditions about what the laws were, and they just said, well, we have to connect it back to the psukim, let's find a way to connect it back. So, and the most obvious answer to that is yes and yes. Like sometimes they did one and sometimes they did the other. And when everybody sort of assumes a law and nobody debates that the law is true, but everybody is throwing out different psukim about how to learn it, that presumably they started with the tradition and now they're just trying to link it back. And when there's actually more of a debate of the law and you have like one or two, let's say 2 opinions, not 5 different psukim being thrown out, then it makes more sense they actually are trying to derive the law, and therefore, you have actual different opinions. Okay, so here it seems like we started with the idea of 30 days, and now we're trying to link it back. Barpada Amar Keneged Nazir Nizro Ha'amrim b'Torah Lamed Chasar Achat. So Barpada says, go count the times it says in the Torah the word Nazir or Nizro, and you'll find out that it'll be 29 times. Now, we were going for 30. So here's the interesting irony. Actually, if you go and count the times it says Nazir and Nizro in the Torah, it is 30. So, which would be great. So he says, well, one of them, you had to say it. You had to introduce the concept, or the Rishonim say, because when it says, Ki Nazir Elohav al Rosho, Nazir in that pasuk means the crown. It doesn't mean the Nazirut. So somehow, although there was 30, he only counted 29, and that's going to lead to the discussion we're about to go into, which is according to Bar Pada, Stam Nazirus really is 29 days, not 30, except if I have to go to the end of day 29, and I only get to end it when I bring my korban, and I can't bring my korban at night, I'm going to wind up bringing my korban on day 30. But Bar Pada says, in principle, it's 29 days. It's just you have to wait till day 30 to bring your korban. So it's very interesting. And he does it, say 30 times Nazir, but he counts only 29 of them. What? And this is Stam. Stam is you. This is unexplicated. Yeah. Like, what?
No, it's just like ironic.
Why is it ironic?
This is a Stam, and then it goes into a gematria. Like...
No, but that's the point, meaning I don't understand your point about Stam and Gematria. Meaning, if somebody says I'm a Nazir without explicating, what should we assume when the Torah describes a Nazir? Is the Torah assuming about what the duration is? So that's the question. So, it says the word Nazir 30 times in the Torah. It's assuming the duration is 30 days. It's bizarre because it's sort of this counting thing that's going on, but not because of the stam.
So maybe I missed it. So I thought the stam was just because of the one time of Nazir, but you're saying it's from all the 30 times, and that's...
No, the Torah says somebody is a Nazir, here's what he does, and when he finishes his Nazirus, he brings his Korbanot. Yeah. The Torah never tells you when does he finish his Nazirus, right? The Torah somehow assumes there's an understood period of Nazirut. Okay, so if you don't say otherwise, maybe you can say I'm going to do it for a year, for 5 years, but if you don't say otherwise, what's the assumed, the stam period of Nazirut? And the answer is 30 days. How do you know that? So now we have, but the same way we use all types of rabbinic tools, hermeneutic tools to get weird things, But that's what we're saying. The Torah is describing this stam period, and we're going to learn the psukim and say you get 30 out of it. Okay, 30 days. So that's what we get. So for Rav Masna, why don't you count? By the way, I should also say an interesting other place where it says where the idea is chaser achat is and is similar to Rabbi as malachot. How do you not the idea of 39 malachot? So one answer is because every time it says the word malacha, malachto, malacha, whatever in the Torah, you get it to 39. Of course, the other problem is really you get it to more like 53 or something. So the Rishonim have to do a really hard job trimming it down to explain how the Gemara got to 39. Anyway, okay, so here you have Bar Pada counting 29 times. So the Gemara says, rather than going to your gematria, why not learn out from Nazir and Israel? He'll say to you, every time it says an extra word Nazir in the Torah, I'm going to teach me something new about the laws of Nazir. For example, like we learned yesterday, Miyayin v'sheichar Yazir, he should, remove himself from wine and intoxicating liquid. So what does that extra Yazir tell you? Even mitzvah wine he can't drink, like we discussed a day or two ago. Nazir, if a person enunciates to take a vow of Nazirut, lahazir lahashem. So what does that doubling language of Nazir lahazir tell you? A person can be a double Nazir. What it means is if I say basically, if I eat this loaf of bread, I'll be a Nazir. And then I say, and if I eat this loaf of bread, I'll be a Nazir. Put both loaves of bread in my mouth at the same time. So we would say that actually I would double Nazirus would mean I have one Nazirus took effect, and the other is hovering. And when I finish one, the other one kicks in. Okay, so and that idea that we can have one waiting and hovering in abeyance is learned out from this word Nazir lahazir. So basically it says, I can't count every single time it says the word Nazir because I need those words to tell me halachas, extra halachas about a Nazir. So the Gemara says, Bar Pada would say back to you, look, you're not going to come up with 29 drashas about a Nazir, okay? So one of those words, minimally, is superfluous, is not going to teach you a drasha. Once that's true, since one of those words is extra, and which must, so therefore its only purpose would to tell you how to count towards the number of days. So they're all able to be counted towards to tell you the number of days. Right. Yes, you use those extra words for a drasha, but some of the words can't be used for a drasha. And that's telling you that all the presence of the word Nazir is to tell you more than just a specific halacha. They're actually supposed to count up the occurrences, and that's supposed to tell you something as well. All right? Are you convinced, Rabbi Dov? Okay, it's fine.
Solid. It's a solid.
It's not. Okay, now we're going to put aside the drashot. We actually have a more interesting debate of whether Nazirus is really 30 days or is it really 29 days, but you just can't bring your korbanot until day 30. Let's see what some of the differences might be. It's not. Stam Nazirus shloshim yom. Stam Nazirus is 30 days. Bishleim l'Rav Masna nichas. That's fine. That's what he says. He says 30. Ela Bar Pada kasha. For Bar Pada, it's a problem. He said 29. Amalcha Bar Pada will tell you, I did yom tlasin de megalech, maybe korbanosov. No, because you have to wait until day 30 in order to shave and to bring your korbanot, and only then are you allowed to be. Does your nazir period stop once you bring your korbanot? So mishum hachet tana shloshim, it won't end until day 30. In principle, the duration is 29 days, but you won't be able to do the thing to end it until day 30. Okay, let's try again. Now. Misha Amar Hareini Nazir. We're going to come up to a Mishnah pretty soon. Somebody says, I'm a Nazir. He has to wait till day 31. Why would you have to wait till day 31? Well, if you say Nazirut is 30 days,
Right.
so then you could say you have to wait till at the end of 30 days you're done, and you bring your korbanot on day 31. But if it's 29 days, we just said that even if you wait the full 29, you bring your korbanot on day 30. So let's take a look. Rav Masna Nicha for Rav Masna. It's good. It's a 30-day duration, and you bring your korbanot on day 31. Ela bar pada kasha. For bar pada, it's difficult because you should be able to bring your korbanot on day 30. Amlecha bar pada ema seifa. Look at the end of that Mishnah. Im gilach v'yom shloshim yatsa. B'diavad, it works on day 30. So I can explain why b'diavad works on day 30 because for me it was a 29 day, and day 30 you can end it. But according to was it Rav Masna? Is it Rav Masna?
Yes.
According to Rav Masna, how should it ever work b'diavad on day 30? Right. You needed a 30-day duration, and then you would bring your korbanot on day 31. Ela seifa misayeh. Fine. The end of it seems to prove he's right that day 30. If you bring your korbanot on day 30, it means it only lasted 29 days. How do we explain why lechatchila you have to wait at day 31? Reisha naseh ka'omer shleimim. Because I'm afraid that let's say somebody says full days. Now, of course, full days wouldn't matter. You're already waiting 29 full days and you're bringing it on day 30. So Tosa says it doesn't really mean somebody will say shleimim. Somebody will say, I'm a Nazir for shloshim yom. Okay. Now, of course, why would somebody say that? So it seems clear that even if Stam Nazir says 29 days for Bar Pada, the difference between 29 days and a month in your mindset, you think it's going to last for a month. You don't think 29 days or whatever. So he's saying it's true. If you said nothing, 29 days, bring it on day 30. But it's quite likely that somebody will say, I'm going to be a Nazir for a month because it's pretty close in their mind, one or the other. And in that case, they'd have to wait till day 31. So therefore, I'm going to say that everybody should wait till day 31 just so it doesn't get confusing. Okay, but in principle, if you say I'm a Stam Nazir, of course you can even, in principle, l'chatchila bring it on day 30. But because of confusion, I'll tell people to wait till day 31. That's how Bar Pad explains l'chatchila day 31, b'diavad day 30. Now let's figure out Rav Masna, because for him you understand why day 31. But how do you get away b'diavad with doing it on day 30? So the Gemara says like this. Rav Masna Kashya Seifa. What does Rav Masna deal with the end? How does he explain b'diavad? You can do it on day 30. Katsavar mixas hayam kikulo. Yes, the same way as we know. Perfect example about this is Avelus. Avelus is 7 days, but a person gets up at the beginning of day 7. Right? There's an idea that part of a day counts as a full day. Okay. Also a halacha that applies in the Torah for, let's say, a woman who is a zava, who counts 7 days of non-bleeding. And according to the halacha, she can go to the mikveh actually in the beginning of the 7th day. We say mikveh sayom kikulo. Okay, not true by Anita. Anita has to wait to the end of the 7 days. Anyway, interesting cases when we do say mikveh sayom, when don't we? But anyway, what it's saying here is that, yes, it is in principle 30-day duration. But you don't have to wait to the end of day 30 and bring it on day 31. As long as you started day 30, that's good enough. And now you can bring your korbanot. But since that relies on the trick of Miksa Yom Kikulo, we'd rather you wait till day 31. But b'diavad, you brought it on day 30, that also gets. Now that's interesting. Normally we don't have a lichatchila idea about Miksa Yom Kikulo. We normally don't say, the other best to do for the whole 7 days, but if you need to get up at the beginning of the 7, that's what we don't say that. We say, you did the beginning of the 7, you're done. Okay? So it's interesting sometimes when we want you to not rely on Miksa Yom Kikulo when we do, but that's what Rav Masna is saying is, it's 30 days, but you can, b'diavad at least, you can do it at the beginning of the day 30, Miksa Yom Kikulo. Part of the day is like the whole day.
So how does this affect if there are consecutive Nazirut from 30 to another 30?
Excellent. We're about to get to that. Oh. Okay. So it's none. Now let's look at another related Mishnah here that is basically going to be the same thing except back to back. Okay. Hareini Nazir shloshim yom. I am a Nazir for 30 days. In Gilach yom shloshim lo yatsa. So if you did it on day 30, you're not yotzei. So clearly here, if you say shloshim yom, it means full 30 days. You don't say miksas yom kikulo. How does that work according to anybody, right? So the Gemara said, well, actually, Bar Pada might not hold of miksas yom kikulo. Right, it wouldn't matter. But because Bar Pada needs full days, full 29 days. But how does it work for Rav Masna? Why don't you say miksas yom? So the Gemara says, B'omer shleimi. No. You said 30 full days, okay? And therefore, that's why it doesn't work, because if you're saying 30 full days, then you can no longer use miksas yom kikulo. Fine. It's not. Let's go back to a Mishnah like the first one we quoted. Misha Nazar Beis Nizirut. Somebody said, I will be a Nazir and I'll be a Nazir after the first one is done. So he shaves the first one after day 31. And the second after day 61. So just to show you, because sometimes, sometimes counting whatever you get lost, like you count the first number or not the first number, whatever. Anyway, so if you go from day 1 to 31, right? So this is, right? So here this was your 30. So this was, right, this was your 30 full days, and then you bring your korbanot here. So that's not assuming mitzvah yom kikulo, because l'chatchila you're not supposed to assume mitzvah yom kikulo. Okay, so 31 days is then when you shave, and then you go to day 61. Now, how does that work? Because on day 31, when you brought your korbanot, okay, you ended your nazirut in the middle of the day, and then your second one started in the middle of the day. So day 31 also became for the second nazirut day 1. So day 61 becomes day 31. Okay, so all it's basically saying is that you wait till day 31, but the first day 31 ends one and begins the other. Okay, that's what that's saying.
Can you clarify something?
Yeah.
Maybe you've said this or it's really simple, but just on a regular Nazirut, so my 30 days are over.
Yeah.
Independent of this machloket.
Right.
I don't bring my korban.
Right. You're still a Nazir.
I'm still full Nazir.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
why Rav Kook's
actively end.
Yes, that's why Rav Kook's student, the Nazir, even if he was not a Nazir Olam, was not able to end his Nazirut, right? Because there was no korban he could bring.
So Bisman Nazir, someone becomes a Nazir, it's a Nazir for life.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So now the that's not. Misha Nazir Beis Nazirut. Megaleach et Rishona Yom 31 v'Ashniya Yom 61. Now we're basically asking the exact same questions we asked before. I'm going to give the same answers. For Rav Masna, that makes sense. You wait till day 31 because it's a 30-day Nazirut. El Bar Pada Kasha, for Bar Pada it's difficult. Why are you waiting till day 31? Wait till day 30 since it's a 29-day Nazirut. Bar Pada. So Bar Pada says, Ema Sefer. Let's look at the end of the Mishnah. So it says, let's say though, instead of doing day 31, you went ahead and you did your thing. You brought your korban and you did your thing on day. Anyway, on day 30, which we said works, right? It either works for Mixas Yom Kikula or it works because it was only a 29-day Nazirut. So you did it on day 30. So day 30 becomes your now new day 1. Okay, so what would be 20? So in order to get to this day, well, let's get to this day 31 because you're always supposed to do it 31. We're going to add 30 to this. 60. I mean, we're going to add 30 because that would get us day 31, right? So then 30 will become day 60, right? So the first one you did for 30 days, and the second one you did for 31, and you're megaleach on day 60. So that's what it says. Ema Seifa. If you did the first one on day 30, the second one you still do the 31 days, and you do it on day 60. So the Gemara says, so anyway, but the bottom line is, it allows for it to end on day 30, b'di'evet. So that works for me. That works for me, because I will say you can do it on day 30. So Reisha, how do I explain why lechatchila you're supposed to wait till day 31? But Omer Shleinim, again, you said full, which really here doesn't mean full. It's borrowing the other language of Shleinim. It really means you said I'm going to do a 30-day Nazirut. And then for that's when we'd make you wait till 61. Or we're afraid of cases where you're going to say, I'll do a full 30-day Nazirut. And therefore, lechatchila, we ask everybody to do it on day 60, on day 31. But in principle, normal Nazirut can be on day 30 because it was 29 days and day 30 is the following day. So that's exactly what he said before. Ulav Masna Kasha Seif. According to Rav Masna, back to the same question we asked before. Why b'di'evet does it work on day 30? Your 30 days aren't up on day 30. So Amalach Rav Masna, he'll say to you, Kiriktani Seifa Yom Shloshim Ole Lakanu Lakan, because it says in the Mishnah, in this case, day 30 counts in both directions. It ends the first one and it begins the next one. Now the question is, yes, it goes in both directions, but your 30 days aren't over. So what's the key principle to say why it worked for him on day 30? Mahi. What does that mean? What underlies the explanation? Mixas Yom Kikulo. Ultimately, it's telling you that part of the day counts. Amra chada zimna. We already learned that from the easier case, 1 unit. Why are you telling me the exact same halacha again by back-to-back units? You already told me that principle that b'diavad day 30 works. So I might have thought maybe you can use a half a day to count the whole day for one. You can't double dip. Right? So it's one thing to say, look, even if you think about the conceptual principle, if I say mixas yom kikulo, it means I got a little bit into day 30. It was like I finished day 30. Okay, well, say you finished day 30 in your Nazirus, but if you finish day 30 in your Nazirus number 1, how can you also say you started Nazirus number 2 during it? Right? If the whole logic is we're looking at it as if you finished that day and you did the whole day of your Nazirus, so it's not, you're not able to start your second Nazirus. That really is a chiddush. That you can say mixas yom kikula both ways, a little bit counted as full 30, and then we'll say you get to now start fresh, and it's like you accepted your Nazirus in the middle of a day, and now you can start your second Nazirus right now. Okay, so it says Hani million Nazirus, Shay Nazirus low, Kamash Moran, that you can even say mixas yom kikula that way, count day 30 both in one direction and in the other direction. So bottom line is, Bar Pada says does not hold the mixas yom kikula. He says it's 29 days. You can never cut into the 29 days. You don't say mixas yom. You always have to bring it on day 30. Maybe lechatchila we'd ask you to bring it on day 31 because of times when people would say a month. But in principle, day 30 is when you should be bringing it. And Rav Masna says no. In principle, it's 30 days. But so therefore, we would like you to wait till day 31 to the full 30 days to be over. But b'diavad, you can do it on day 30 itself and even start a new one on day 30 itself based on the mixas yom kikulo principle. Okay, so we'll end here, and and we're now already getting a little ahead, which, as people tell me, is a good idea.